Hey, you guys like short, scary stories? Dark bleatings, everybody. I hope you all had a really good Halloween. At the time that you're seeing this video, I'm at World Fantasy Con, and that's why tomorrow's video might be slightly amusing to you guys, because obviously I'm pre-filming these. I just remembered what tomorrow's video is, but today, before we get to that, I'm going to give you a whole bunch of short, scary story recommendations. I have read so many anthologies and collections this year so far, and I haven't talked about any of these books in much detail, or if I've mentioned them at all, so I've been saving them for this video. So I have got in total 6 anthologies / collections to tell you about, although I think they're mostly anthologies, and I've just picked my 3 favourite stories from each one, because otherwise we will be here all day. I'd have to do like a dedicated video for every book. But I just wanted to give you an overall feel of the anthologies if you enjoy short stories, and my picks for my favourites in each book. This is an honourable mention to start because I haven't finished reading the book yet, but The End of the World as We Know It, I'm sure a lot of you already know about, edited by Christopher Golden and Brian Keene. That is an anthology based in the world of The Stand, and Stephen King signed off on it, wrote the foreword for it, everything, tweeted about it, seems very, very happy with it. I'm really enjoying that so far. It's just with the amount of requests and the size of the book, the anthology is almost as big as The Stand is. I haven't had time to finish it, read it all yet, so I am very slowly making my way through, but I will do a full video review on that when I'm done because it's so big. But yes, so I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that. It's amazing, everything I've read so far. I just didn't want to leave it out and have you think I didn't like it at this point, because I have mentioned that I got that. So the first book we're going to talk about is New Writings and the Supernatural Omnibus, edited by David A. Sutton. So the New Writings in Horror and the Supernatural, there was volume 1 and 2, came out quite some time ago, as in like decades ago. David A. Sutton was working on these, and very excitingly is releasing, it might be out now from the publisher. I will put sales links for this in the description because it's not on Amazon yet, so if you do want to go and have a look and check it out. So yeah, for the first time in quite a while, David A. Sutton has sat down with these stories and collected, sort of an ultimate volume of them, and they're really good. What I really enjoyed about this omnibus is that horror changes over time. So with each decade, and this is what I've noticed when I'm reading a lot anyway, with each decade there seems to be the different anxieties of society is reflected through horror fiction quite often. And so this was really fun for me to go back and read stories that were written and published around the time the first 2 volumes were published, and also a lot of those stories were written even before that. So it was fun to kind of go back in time to the hellscape of the world as people knew it back then, in creative ways, obviously. So I've had to write all my favourite stories down because I'm awful with short story titles and I would not remember off the top of my head, but the first of my 3 favourite stories, and the favourites are in no particular order unless I specify otherwise, is called The Inglorious Rise of the Catsmeat Man by Robin Smith. And this one is one that I described as Sweeney Todd meets Psycho. This is about a mother and a son making pies, with an obvious sort of nod to Sweeney Todd, in my opinion. And what I really liked about this is that you know that there's something not right about the pies. Obviously this is a horror story, but what I really liked was the very strange and difficult dynamic between the mother and sons as this is going on. So it's a gruesome idea that is taken more seriously than you might think. That was very enjoyable for me as a reader. I've got a really dark sense of humour, so when a concept like that could lean into parody or comedy only has a couple of like little dark funny moments, but generally it's played straight, I really enjoy it. So I really enjoyed that one. There's another called The Hollow Way by Michael G. Coney, and this was what I like to call, I don't know actually when this story was written, but this feels like a good old-fashioned 1980s horror idea to me. It's about 2 brothers who see 2 girls at a bar and they both kind of had their eye on the same one, and they flip a coin to see which one, you know, kind of has dibs. And before anyone gets up in the air about that, I know we have more serious conversations about, you know, men feeling entitled to women and da now, and that's a serious conversation that I'm usually a part of. But in this case, this is just as in like they're like two teenagers, and it's no harm meant by it. I just want to like straighten that out. I don't want you to feel put off, because this isn't that kind of story. This is like, that was the inciting thing to get the ball rolling. So one of them wins the coin toss, so they go and talk to the girls, and you know, they end up staying with these women as they grow up and married and everything. And then one of the brothers one day is having a conversation with his brother's wife, and he realizes that his reality is not looking like it's used to, and there seems to have been some kind of shift. And I can't say so much more about it than that, but it feels like I guess I have to describe this as like a supernatural sci-fi horror story. Like, there's some sci-fi conventions, but no machines or anything like that. But definitely like a supernatural kind of story as well. It made me feel really stressed, because if you ever wonder about like how your life might have gone differently if you'd made a different decision this one time 22 years ago or something, and then it feels like things are wrong. Yeah, sorry, I'm not explaining this very well, but let's just move on to the next story. But I really enjoyed that one. That one made me feel stressed and kind of disjointed from reality for a minute. And I think that the author did a really good job of conveying the mindset of the protagonist. Okay, and this one actually is my favourite story, because again, this to me feels like good old-fashioned 1980s monster horror. It's called Gruely by an author called James Wade, and this is about a little boy that has an imaginary friend that wants things, and if the kid doesn't deliver the things, there are going to be consequences. So it's a really nice, straightforward, short story, you know, sort of like no frills kind of plot. Just a good old story about a boy and his, you know, possibly monstrous imaginary friend, and how imaginary the imaginary friend actually is. Maybe you can decide, or maybe it's defined in the story. I'm not going to tell you because spoilers, but I really enjoyed that one. That one was just, you know, kind of serious subject matter, but just so much fun to read. Okay, so we're moving on to the next book now, and this is very exciting because it is New Writings in Horror and the Supernatural, Volume 3, this time edited by Stephen Jones, who got David A. Sutton's blessing to do this. So this is the first New Writings in Horror and the Supernatural in decades, like outside of the Omnibus, but like giving us brand new stories to go in this anthology series, which it now is. Again, I will put the link in the description for you on this one. I am quite obsessed with this anthology as well. This is one of my favourite anthologies of the year. So when I do my lists at the end of the year, this is most likely going to be in there. What I really liked about this anthology is we've got like I'm going to read through the authors for you, because a lot of these are people who are writing today. Obviously, they've got works. So authors that I've heard of, and authors that I haven't, that I'm new to. So David A. Sutton wrote a story for this, which is amazing. The Fish Platform by Simon Kurt Unsworth. I don't know why I said the title of the story as well, but Simon Kurt Unsworth I'm very familiar with, and there's another Unsworth coming up in this video. Gary Kilworth I know of, Mia Dahlia I've read, CC Adams is a friend and also a fantastic author. I was really happy to see him in here, because this is a mixture of more established authors and then also people that are mostly in indie presses. So I think Stephen's done a really wonderful job with the mix of authors he's put in here. We've got Reggie Oliver, who I know of, Caitlin R. Kiernan, who I'm hoping to get an interview with at some point. Tyler Jones is new to me, Scott Bradfield is new to me, Keith Rosson, who doesn't love Keith Rosson, familiar with Keith, Lisa Morton, familiar with, Graham Masterton, of course, who doesn't know Graham Masterton, and that is a co-written story with Carolina Mogielska. I'm so sorry, I know I butchered that. Graham and Carolina have been writing a lot together. recently. If you're a Masterton fan, you'll probably know that. And then there's Steve Rasnick-Tem, who I am familiar with, and David J. Scow, whose name I was mispronouncing until I heard Stephen Jones say Scow. I was saying Shaw all this time. And Michael Marshall Smith I know, Ramsey Campbell I know, and Sharon Gosling was new to me. So my 3 favourites in this one, and it was quite hard to pick because I really liked a lot of them. So The Monster by Keith Rawson. Whew. So there's a lot going on in this one. This is a lot packed into a short story, which makes for very, I don't know, thought-provoking times afterwards when you're having a nice cup of tea and you're thinking, you're digesting what you've just read. This is about a guy who's separated from his wife, and he's been sleeping in his van in the garage, and they have a son who has been kind of radicalized into white supremacy, and there's been an incident that they're punishing their son for. So there's loads of family strife. So, you know, you've got this marital fracturing, and then you've also got the son and how his dad feels about his behavior, how his mum feels about the behavior. They're not really able to co-parent right now because things are feel much more spiteful from the wife's end, so which made me wonder what the guy might have done, or if it was warranted spite or what. But there's a lot going on, and he decides that I'm not sure why he decides to do this. I did realise it when I was reading, but he decides to get his son a monster as a pet. And what I really liked about this universe of this story is that this felt like it was set in just our world, just completely normal, but monsters exist, and nobody is at all surprised that this guy has bought his son a pet monster, because they're like, oh, what kind is it? So it feels like monsters are kind of just around, and maybe some make good pets or whatever, but I really loved just that. It's funny how like one thing about the world, and it doesn't feel like our world, even though it was very much set in our world. It was just so much fun. And yeah, so he gets his son this monster, and then very quickly regrets getting him this particular monster. No one has really seen this kind of monster before. There's a lot in the way of metaphor and analogy, and I'm sure that depending on your own perspective and experiences, you might read different things into it than what I did. But I just found that this was a really good monster story, really good horror, especially towards the end, and then it's a really good people story, family story, like a guy and his struggles kind of story, regret. Like there's loads built into it, but I really enjoyed it. There was just a lot going on, and it was all good. Okay, one of my other favourites is called Charlie Wordsworth and His Host of Effing Daffodils. It's by Michael Marshall Smith, and this one is one where my only complaint about it was that I wanted there to be more. I felt like this could also, like, it does work as a resolved short story. It's not gonna, you know, really leave you hanging, but it could also work as like the prologue to a longer piece of work, I think. This is about 2 guys who grew up together, they're besties, and they've done a lot of that growing up doing crime, and now they're doing very serious crime, and they worked together for a while and then kind of went their separate ways. One of them was apparently better at certain types of crime than the other one, so the one kind of got like promoted, so to speak. But yeah, they're both pretty heinous, the things that they're doing. They got their motivations and whatever, but pretty heinous guys. And one of them, the one that's sort of been more elevated in his crime career, is tasked with, how much do I say? He's tasked with doing something that the other one really wouldn't like. And what I really loved about this is that it threw up this flare of like your own sense of personal boundaries, morality, loyalty, and all of that. But instead of going the obvious route with how the more elevated character was going to handle things, the author went in a totally different direction to what I was expecting, and then the story and the mindset of the guy was just completely different to what I expected to read after that sort of like linchpin moment. So that one, I'm not really like a crime kind of person. There wasn't like, this was a horror story with sort of like crime as a background, so it wasn't really a crime story, but it was just really well done. The characters were really good. There was lots of things I was surprised by where I was not expecting to be surprised at these various points. So it was really, really well written, and I really, really enjoyed it. And my absolute favourite story in this anthology, and I feel the same way about this that I did about I Miss You Too Much by Sarah Langan, which I raved about in the tail end of last year. It was that one was in Elemental Forces, edited by Mark Morris, and I'd never read Sarah Langan before, and then I became immediately obsessed with her, and now I want to read everything. And this is the same for me with Sharon Gosling, who I'd never read before. Sorry, I sound weird because unbelievably I am still ill. I don't have a spleen, so if I get a cold, sometimes it hangs around for weeks, and it has decided it's hanging around for the entirety of October. But there you go. Anyway, breathe. Ending in Ruin by Sharon Gosling has made me an automatic Sharon Gosling fan, and I really hope that she's got lots of work out there that I can get and read immediately, along with all the other things I want to get and read immediately. You know what I'm like. This is about a woman who goes on like a cycling trip, and she has not prepared well, she has not packed enough food, and she's sort of underestimated the difficulties of this little route she's taking, and the whole thing really, and she's just very ill prepared, and she sort of beds down in a graveyard, I think, for the night on one night, and her tummy's are rumbling, and she's quite worried about where she's going to get food from, and she's very short of supplies, and there's a boiled egg that's it's like a little shrine that's been set up near to where she's sleeping. And she thinks, oh, I shouldn't take that egg, it's not mine. Somebody's left it there as kind of a weird thing on a grave, obviously, but she doesn't feel like she can take it. But the more the night goes on and the more her stomach grumbles, the more she just thinks, well, it's just gotta go off, isn't it? I may as well eat it. So she eats it and encounters a woman the next day who's talking to her, and the woman says, you ate the egg, didn't you? And you ate the egg, didn't you? And those words have just burned into my brain now, because as soon as she said them, I was like, obviously you know that Our Lady should not have eaten the egg. You know it's a horror story, don't eat the egg, for God's sake. But as soon as the character kind of said that and cemented that, I had the same reaction as our main character had to hearing those words. Like, she knew that wasn't just oh, I'm really annoyed that you ate this egg. It means something that you ate this egg. And then scary, weird things start to happen to her, and it turns into like this great folk horror story. And the imagination and the world building and everything for such a short story, I think that the author did such a great job of she let you in. You saw like the edges of this world. You've got like a little bubble that our protagonist is in, and all we know is what she knows. But at the edges, in the periphery of everything, you're just getting like this world as it might exist outside of her, and like what she's inadvertently stepped into, and it just gets scarier and creepier, and the dread and everything is just it's so delicious. Sometimes I wonder if we okay, you know, as horror fans, that this kind of stuff is so exciting and so what's the word I'm looking for? It's so appealing to us. Let's move on to the next anthology now. Now this one is a bit different to the other anthologies on this list, because this is all female stories. It's called Pretend You Don't See Her. That's the anthology, and it's edited by Jill Girardi and Lydia Prime, so it's from Candisha Press. And yeah, these are all female stories. I think that all of the authors, there are no dudes in this lineup. Yeah, no dudes in this lineup at all, which I read plenty of anthologies that even to this day are still composed all of men, and no one ever says anything about it, and no one seems to have an issue with it. So if anyone in my comments starts kicking off that men were left out of this one, I'm going to be annoyed, because the point of this was female stories from female perspectives. So I didn't mean to sound so defensive there, sorry. I'm used to just always having to argue my case if there's like a woman-specific project. Somebody always kicks off what men weren't allowed in. When it happens all the way around all the other time. When it happens the other way around all the time, is what I tried to say there. Okay, so the first story that I loved in this anthology is called You Got Me Babe by Emma Rose Darcy. That reminded me, the title alone, I wondered if we were going to get Shades of You by Caroline Kepnes. Well, more the Netflix adaptation really, because I just remember Joe Goldberg saying "You got me, babe" after throwing a rock through Beck's window. This one, I've never read Emma Rose Darcy before, and this made me want to read more Emma Rose Darcy, so I'm very excited to tell you about this story. This story, I really loved it. It was, so there's a young woman and she's friends with this guy, they're really good friends. They go on a night out one night and he leaves early, and then just a little bit of time passes where no one hears from him, and she gets quite worried because it's unlike him to not be in touch. So she goes to his home, his flat, to just check on him to see if he's all right. And it turns out that the girl he met at the bar is now his girlfriend, even though it's been, and he's very intense about her. And it's been a very short amount of time that they've known each other. I think he met this girl on the night out, so that's like the first kind of red flag, is the level of intensity. And he hasn't left home because he's been writing, and he tells his friend that he's fine and that the new girlfriend has been helping him write, but he seems very highly anxious. He's very intense, and nothing feels right about this. And then it feels even more wrong when the friend talks to the girlfriend, and they just clearly something is just, it's bad, it's really, really bad. The friend gets kind of a better idea of what's wrong with the relationship when she starts to experience something similar. And I can't really talk more about the story again because I don't want to spoil it for you, because the escalation of events and the progression of the story is so much fun to read and like discover on your own. But it is the most twisted story of a muse I've ever read, and I love these kinds of stories. But this one, I know, they just felt like there was a lot of subtext to this one, a lot more depth than it might look on first appearances. So I really enjoyed it, and it was just, it got like progressively more stress inducing and like creepy to read, which, you know, there's always a plus for me if I'm reading a horror story. The next one I really like is called Selkie's Stew by Lauren Lee Smith, and this one was just really, this was very quiet kind of horror, but definitely horror. This is about a woman who's clearly in a horrible marriage, really, really horrible marriage, and they've got a kid, and he's critical of her cooking, shall we say. So she starts adding another ingredient. Like, he's critical of her cooking and also very critical of her. He doesn't want to take her out. He's ashamed to be seen with her for physical reasons. And I just think that anyone that's ever been in kind of a nasty mental relationship like that, with a partner, would really relate to this. Unfortunately, I did. It really, it took me back to a house I lived in with an ex from years ago, where she just, yeah, she's very isolated and controlled and kind of made to feel bad about herself and everything, but she doesn't have the luxury of the option to leave easily or at all, you might think. So I really enjoyed this one because of how it ended. But really, very sensitively told, very smooth, lovely writing, and yeah, very relatable, like through the metaphors that I use. So I really enjoyed that, and I really, really rated that one. And then my other favourite in this anthology, I was so delighted to see this author appear. So this one is called The Ballad of Fat Amy, and it's by Mocha Pennington, and I love, love, love Mocha Pennington. Mocha is recently new. I said recently new, what kind of phrasing was that? She's recently been getting her name out there, so not loads of work under her belt yet, but everything I've read from Mocha has been really, really good, really entertaining, and really the kind of like tropes and things that she uses for horror, it's really, really fun. So The Ballad of Fat Amy. Whew. So this story is about Kyle. God damn it, Kyle. He's away with his girlfriend trying to enjoy a nice weekend with another couple, and they're not like all just friends, there are some other family connections there, I think. And a mysterious package turns up, and everyone is a bit flabbergasted by the package, except for Kyle. Well, he is flabbergasted, but he's the only one that recognises what's in the box. What's in the box? And he is very unnerved because who knows where they are? Why would this person track him down and send this thing? And also, how could they possibly have? And then another package arrives, and it really escalates, and I don't know where I thought this story was going, but I definitely didn't think it was heading where it went at the end. It's very, very brutal. And again, this is a really good human story about someone who, you know, Kyle, let's say he made a mistake, but initially you don't know whether or not to hate him, because you can decide that as you find out more information about why he's receiving these packages. But putting yourself in the mind of like the characters as Mocker is painting them, like it's really just such an exercise in empathy, which I think really helps with the horror at the end. So the thing that I've noticed that Mocker is really, really good at when she's writing horror stories is she's so good at getting you empathizing with the characters, or really like deeply seeing into their thought processes, so you're really like enmeshed with them, that by the time she like smacks you with all of the horror stuff, you're so emotionally involved that it's just horrifying, which is perfect. It's like she's very effective storyteller for eliciting fear out of you as it goes on, if that makes sense. So yeah, I highly recommend this anthology. I really enjoyed it. There were some stories that were a bit of a miss for me in it. It wasn't like a perfect anthology. In fact, I haven't rated any of these anthologies 5 stars. I think that these have all been 4 stars so far. But yeah, they've been like the highlight stories for me have just been so good. And generally speaking, the quality of the stories consistently throughout these 3 books I've already talked about has been very pleasing. Okay, we're on a collection now. We've got 3 anthologies talked about, so we're moving on to Songs of Shadow, Words of Woe by Matthew R. Davis, another writer that I really like, that I've been reading for a few years. And very hard to pick favourite stories, to be honest, in a collection by Matthew R. Davis, because he's a brilliant storyteller, and I think he really excels in shorts and with longer form. Actually, I don't know why I tried to even make a distinction. But the first story that I want to talk about that I really enjoyed, this is the top 3 story, is called A Walking Wound, and this is about a sort of musician slash photographer that takes a picture of a woman. It's a creepy night. She takes a picture and there's this woman, and then things get really creepy when the woman disappears from that photograph but starts turning up in others. And this isn't the first story I've read about creepy photography related things and things that shouldn't be in pictures being there and things changing and things like that, but the way that Matthew wrote this and the point of it, and I don't want to spoil what it is, but he did do something different that I haven't seen before. So I really, really enjoyed that. This was like kind of a new kind of scary photo kind of story, and Matthew is excellent at characters. I think that's one of his strengths as a writer, which really serves you in a short story, because you've got such a short amount of time to tell a story and to get people invested or anything. But I think Matthew does really nail it with getting you to care about the characters from the off, or the characters' plight from the off. The next story, and this was one of the more original short stories that I've read this year, and maybe in general, and it's in a subgenre that I don't want to tell you, because when you realise what the subgenre is, it would be a spoiler. Like that, it's a twist as it unfolds. It's called The Haunted Heart of Eben Eidolon, and this is about a group of 7 friends who are in a bar after hours, and they've locked themselves in following the funeral of a close friend of theirs who is sadly gone. Obviously it's a funeral, I don't know why I felt the need to elaborate on that. And there's an 8th person in the bar, and none of them know this person, and oh man, it just gets creepier and creepier and creepier. So they decide to pour a shot each to honour the friend and stuff before they go, and they offer one to this person. And it's at this point, and I cannot go into more detail without spoiling it, and this was such a moment for me that I don't want to do that and take it away from you if you read it, but it's at this point when they offer the shot to this person that they realise something about this person that is it made my flesh crawl. It made me feel really like uneasy and stressed, and it was amazing. And it all, you know, ends in a really satisfying conclusion also. The last story, so I'm just looking at my notes over here, and I'm probably going to mispronounce this title because I'm awful with this. It's called Nymphea. Anyway, it's about this guy called Alec who loses his relationship because for a few reasons, but one of the main ones is that his girlfriend realizes that he kind of unapologetically has a thing for younger women, like, you know, people who are at iffy ages, like you'd question if they're legal, and she's, you know, worried obviously that it's going to be a bit worse than that. And he's making all sorts of excuses, and because we're in his head, we're reading his sort of justifications and him trying to dismiss like what's actually wrong here. And he's like, you know, well, all guys do it and you can't help what you think and blah 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 blah, but it's his actions really that are kind of the issue. And he's he's at a lake one night and he hears, you know, voices and stuff, and there are gorgeous, possibly not legal girls swimming around, and it's like the painting of the water nymphs that he has a print of, and he wonders, you know, what their intentions are for sort of like drawing him in. And yeah, I'll stop there because the subject matter makes me really uncomfortable and it's gross, but the angle of the story is obviously that this is not okay and that some sort of karma or some sort of lesson is heading to this guy. And I really like how Matthew handled the subject, and it was a really, so like it's like a creepy, scary horror story where I wasn't quite sure where it was going to go, but also we're dealing with like, we're kind of rooting for my cat's trying to break in, sorry. We're kind of rooting for something to happen to this guy rather than worrying for him, if that makes sense. So I found it a really satisfying story, and it was the idea was really fresh to me as well. I really enjoyed it. Okay, now we're on to the books that I have physical copies of. So first up, this is a sort of, I'm going to call this a mini anthology because there's just 5 stories in it. But this was delightful. This is Horror Tales from Wales. By Kevin J. Kennedy, and it's edited by Kevin J. Kennedy and Anne Kieran. And there are 5 stories of sort of Welsh horror in here using Welsh folklore. I really love the cover, that should be noted. So cool. We do have a pretty cool flag, I will say. Wales is very fun, so I like the horror version of it there. And what was really lovely to me about this is that I personally know, for one of the stories is authored by 2 people, so I know 4 of the authors. I know of the other 2, one a bit more than the other, but this was all familiar names to me as well, so that was really cool. So the first story is called They Come at Night. Oh, I'm actually not going to tell you like 3 favourites from this one because there's only 5, and I don't want, if the authors see it, I just don't want 2 authors to feel like their stories were like less good than the others or something, from my opinion. So I really enjoyed them all. So they Come at Night by Richard Clive. I was very excited to see Richard Clive in this book because Richard Clive, I've got his 2 other collections, and he is an excellent writer, brilliant short storyteller. So I was really excited. And this is about a guy whose husband just went missing one time, and he hasn't been dealing with it very well, and his friend comes to stay with him to check on him, and he keeps talking about, he seems to think his husband isn't quite gone, or that they always wanted kids, and there's this theme of kids in this, and he seems to think that something that is very impossible is happening, and his friend doesn't believe him. He's very worried about his like mental state, as most people would be with the kind of things that this guy is saying. So they go out together, and his friend is thinking, oh, he'll just prove to his friend that this isn't actually what's happening, but maybe there's something out there. And that just had a very Welsh feel with the picture that Richard paints of the scenery and everything, and the folklore that's used. I don't want to like kind of give away what the folklore is in any of these in case you are up on Welsh folklore, but some of this I hadn't read. I'm not I'm a Welsh person, I'm a rubbish Welsh person, I can't speak Welsh and I don't know much about Welsh urban legends and things like that, so this was like really fun for me to read. It made me feel a bit closer to home. The next story is called Dogs of Hell. It's by C.L. Raven. And C.L. Raven are cat and lynx, and they write together. They're twins that write together. They do loads of cool stuff together, and I've met them a couple of times, and not for a while, so I didn't know if they were still writing, so this was really fun for me. And this story is about a guy who, and it's like the storytelling, it's like it does paint him as melodramatic. He wants to end things, and he wants to go out with his girlfriend, and so he tries, and she's just not on board with this, and the way that she's talking to him is sort of, she's more logical and he's in a very emotional state, so like his kind of drama, I don't mean it disrespectfully, but the way the language he's using is dramatic, as people tend to be when they're really emotional, and she seems cold, but it seemed to me like she has just been dealing with this kind of stuff for a while. So she calls an ambulance for him, and then it's only when he gets sort of a glimpse of the other side that he realizes that maybe life would have been a better place to stay in than what's after it. It's called Dogs of Hell, so you can use your imagination, but it was just like that would make for like a really cool Halloween time reading story. Like, so I know we're just after Halloween now, but it's never too late to read any horror, so this is, yeah, I would put this as like sort of autumn winter reading, so I really enjoyed it. And then we've got The Vengeance of Black Bart by C.S. Jones, and I've read Colours by C.S. Jones and some other shorts, I think. That was cool to see Jones pop up here as well. And this starts with some piratey stuff, and I thought, oh no, because I'm not really into, I don't know why, but I just don't really care about pirate stories. I tend to not be that interested if something is set on a ship at sea or something for some reason. It's just not an area that interests me, but it kind of like, that's kind of like the backdrop of the story, and then the rest of the story is about two kids, siblings, and they're in a really, really bad position. But basically this is sort of a Welsh take on the Pied Piper kind of story, and it just, there's like, you feel like there's supernatural stuff coming, but there are people who definitely believe in what's coming, and they're making their bad decisions based on that. So you're really worried about these kids the whole time, and I can't spoil it for you, can't tell you if those kids are safe, but very, very tense story. And then we have got Bravo by David Watkins, who I know, like David is the person that I know the best personally out of all of these authors, so I was very excited to see David here. David is good at scaring me with things in the woods and creepy creatures, and this was no different. An area that David is really good in is loads of action in his horror. You can tell that he probably, I can't say for sure, but I guess he likes stuff like Aliens, like cool like action horror mashup. This is about two guys in the woods, and then they see some red dots and realise the dots are eyes. I'm not going to tell you what the eyes belong to, but needless to say, I was pretty unnerved and made me not want to go in the woods. And I actually did grow up with this town urban legend about certain things being in certain woods. Like, I'm in like basically a valley, so I'm in a bowl of mountains here that are all covered with trees, and there was one mountain that we called the Three Sisters, and there were rumours about things up there that have nothing to do with, they were witch rumours, but there was a whole other thing that you'd be more worried about, and it reminded me of that, so that kind of took me back to my childhood, so I really enjoyed that. And then the fifth story is by Lee Allen, who I'm familiar with, but not as familiar with as the others, and I don't personally know Lee Allen, and it's called Lunar Eclipse, and now I'm going to really show up my lack of Welsh, Melchtith Ithraig. I'm really sorry, Lee, and to all of my fellow Welshies. I lived in England a lot when I was little, and then when we moved back, I found I didn't have a Welsh accent, and I found it really hard. It's really hard to speak Welsh if you don't have a Welsh accent, and it took me a long time to get to grips, and I have never fully got to grips. This one, I wouldn't normally say that this is my personal cup of tea because there's lots of sexy stuff in it, and if you've been watching my channel, you know I'm an insane prude and the sexy stuff makes me blush and I just don't like it. But this is about a guy who is wandering around, as one does, one night, and he sees a woman that's on an altar and she's nude and she's having a nice time by herself on this altar, nude. And obviously there's something ritualistic going on here. So I did really enjoy the bones of the story. I'm bashful now even describing it to you because of the sexy. But if you're not like me and you're not a child about these things, you probably would also really like this story. So overall, I really enjoyed it. It was a really quick read, just a nice, sweet little horror of horrors kind of Welsh book. And I really enjoyed it. Last up, I will say the reason I've left this book till last is because this is my favourite book of all the books I've mentioned overall. And I think my favourite shorts are in this one out of all of them. I think 2 of the 3 favourites I've got in this are my 2 favourite stories overall from everything I've said in this video. It's Benjamin Kurt Unsworth's Into Wrack and Ruin, and I love this cover, and I got to be there for Ben's book launch, and I'd read the ebook but I wanted to get a lovely physical copy. I really enjoyed this. Ben is, in terms of what he's had published, he is also quite new to publishing, but in the time that he has been writing and publishing, the quality of his writing has jumped up so dramatically. I can't even tell you. I read, so his dad is Simon Kurt Unsworth, and they co-wrote one of the Black Shuck Books Shadows together, and they didn't like co-write the stories, but they mixed the stories up and they didn't put their names on any of them, so you could like kind of guess whose stories were who. And Ben was a decent writer then. He's a really good writer now. So there's been, yeah, he's come along so much, and I really enjoyed it. So it was kind of hard for me to pick favourites. But the first favourite I'm going to tell you is In the Forest of Bones and Shadows. And this is about 2 people that are out in the woods because they are trying to get, they're going to pick up badger cameras, you know, to watch the badgers, and then when they get to the site of one of the cameras, the camera's gone, but something absolutely horrifying has been left in its place, and there's this real sense as the story goes on of like the woods consuming them, like literally eating them is what it feels like. And there's a creature, and it feels like it came right out of a Tales from the Crypt Keeper episode or something. And I just really loved it. And Ben is young, and I don't mean that in any sort of patronising way. I was just really surprised that this kind of monster horror came out of somebody his age, because this is like harkening back to like late 70s and early 80s ideas of like what a horror story is. So I just really loved it. I wasn't expecting that kind of sort of nostalgia stab from somebody who's literally half my age. And then this is possibly my favourite story, the next one I'm going to talk about, but it's hard to say because the other one is also my favourite story. But the all-embracing nature of a plastic bag. This was such a good idea, and Ben read this out loud at his book launch, which was really fun. This is about a plastic bag, and it's told from the perspective of the plastic bag, and the plastic bag is being used for murder, for suffocating people. So we're getting this sort of internal monologue of this bag and how it feels about what it's being used for, and also how it feels about the guy that's using it. And it's like full of innuendo that's like kind of funny but also makes your skin crawl at the same time. And it's because there's sort of it's written in first person, and because there's kind of like a funny edge to it, that's very disarming when you get to the really horrible stuff that the bag is doing. So it was just like a really fun idea that has quite a lot of personality and humour injected to it, but also takes the subject quite seriously at the same time. So I just loved it. It's one of the more, maybe the most unique story that I've read this year. I've read a few stories from the perspective of a building, which I've enjoyed, but from the perspective of a plastic bag that's suffocating people to death, it was just such a good time. And then the last one is the epilogue, because the thing about Into Wrack and Ruin is that all of these stories are in universe, so that was really fun as I was going along. And there's like, all the stories are like really different to each other, but you do by the end get the sense of like, oh, this is all happening in the same place. And the last story, it's Epilogue, Oh Little Town, and this is a Christmas horror story, and I'm going to be mentioning it again in December, no doubt, about Christmas tradition. This story was so short that it's really hard to talk about, but basically a Santa is elected. The people decide who's going to be the Santa that year, but it's really not necessarily a role that you would want. And this was kind of the best kind of folk horror for me. It's really short, really sharp. The whole town is depicted and encapsulated so well as just somewhere you would never want to go with these kinds of traditions. And the horror idea that Ben uses is also extremely unique. I've never seen anything like it. So I absolutely loved it, and that is also possibly my favourite story. I don't know which out of that and the plastic bag one is my favourite, but I really, really love them both. So that's Into Wrack and Ruin. Highly recommend this. I gave this one 5 stars. I loved it. So that's a whole bunch of short stories for you there. I hope there was something for you to enjoy. If you're tempted by any of the anthologies and you want any more information, let me know in the comments and we can talk about them. I'll see you tomorrow for a video that you're going to think is ridiculous, considering my next video is probably going to be my fantasy con, but cool. But I will see you tomorrow. Please.